나무 묘호랭개교 나무 묘호랭개교 나무 묘호랭개교 all these questions from a poor understanding, or even if read at all, the Lotus Sutra, and an absolute, I don't know what to call it, a stubborn kind of ignorance about the 3,000 realms. All centered around this doubt that the mind state of Buddha can exist in an ordinary human. Did they not get any of the lessons of Shakyamuni? Didn't Shakyamuni make it abundantly clear that he, Siddhartha Gautama, as an enlightened Shakyamuni, was a man who attained Buddhahood in his life? Did they miss that part? Anyway, we've read 7 parts of an interrogation of Nichiren, which of course Nichiren wrote these, but he's pointing out, I think, in this teaching, simply how stubborn people are in adhering to inferior beliefs because they're just more convenient. They're easier. They don't require conviction. They don't require penetrating understanding, you know? So, Nichiren is going to answer that lengthy question we finished with in the last video. By the way, thank you for being here. I hope this finds you in good health and secure. Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. My patrons, you make this possible. You guys are awesome. Don't forget to like, subscribe, share if you have that opportunity. Download the audio podcasts if they're helpful to you. You can listen to them and own them whenever you like. And in the meantime, let's get back to the Gosho on revealing the treatise on revealing the spiritual contemplation in the most venerable one in the 5th 500-year period after the Buddha's extinction. We are reading the chapter Upholding the Lotus Sutra and Attaining Buddhahood. And as I already prefaced, this 7-part question, our esteemed teacher Nichiren is going to answer. The 7 parts of this question you've just asked are most difficult to answer from the perspective of someone who hasn't studied, right? However, the differences between the Lotus Sutra and all other sutras are clearly stated in those sutras. If you'll just read them, or at least take my word as I quote them, you'll see it's very obvious. He goes on. The former reveals the truth, while the latter do not. When the Lotus Sutra was preached, the Buddha of many treasures appeared to verify its truth, and numerous Buddhas in manifestation, Buddhas from all over the world in 10 directions, all over the universe, actually, came together to admire the preaching. Whereas in the Pure Land Sutra, for instance, it is merely stated that Buddhas in the worlds of the 6 directions showed their tongue in praise of the Buddha. You know, tongue is used in all of these sutras, these teachings, to indicate the spread of the word. So if all you do is show your tongue, you say, okay, I'm a teacher and I'm spreading the word. But if you reach your tongue to the Brahma heaven, in other words, completely out of sight, then your teaching goes into perpetuity. Yeah? That's a far greater establishment of a dedication to teaching, to spreading the word of self-enlightenment. And we only read that in the Lotus Sutra, right? So that's why he brings up the tongue thing. The tongue thing. The two groups of Hinayana sages called the Sarvaka and Pratyeka Buddha, the two vehicles, learning and realization, who are guaranteed in the Lotus Sutra to attain Buddhahood, are condemned in other sutras to wander forever without ever attaining Buddhahood. Ichantika, too full of themselves. According to the Lotus Sutra, the Buddha has been the eternal Buddha since 500 dust particle kalpas ago, while according to other sutras, he attained perfect enlightenment for the first time under the Bodhi tree at Buddha Gaya. Well, that's because one interpretation is Siddhartha attained enlightenment. The other interpretation is the enlightenment that he reached, the Buddha perception, well, that's built in. That's in everything in the universe. By the way, that includes you and I. You and me, sorry. Yeah? Next, regarding your contention in part 6, that commentators have not preached the doctrine of the mutual possession of the 10 realms, Grandmaster Tendai has this to say, quote, Vasubandhu and Nagarjuna acknowledged it privately, but pretended not to have been aware of it, and they preached provisional teachings to suit the time. In other words, from all the documentations, letters, wrote, the writing down of discussions, scholarly debate, and so forth, they knew about the 10 realms. Conceptually, they knew about it. But it was one of those teachings that is like, don't just spread that ad hoc to anyone who'll listen, because it'll confuse them. It'll be too much for them. The capacity of people today, in their day, was not at the point where they could handle understanding the facets of the mind at that level without getting totally confused, and then you'd risk them falling off the path because it just would be too difficult to practice, right? How true is that of human nature? I mean, we live in an age of no pain, no gain, to a point, right? We know that something has to challenge us if it's of any merit. It's an odd kind of valuation we give things, right? But if it gets to be too hard, well, then it's not for me. And we see that with Buddhism, right? Oh, the Lotus Sutra is too intellectual. It's too difficult. It's not for us. Let's do these hand gestures and pablum our way through it with magical words. How disappointing. And the Lotus Sutra, not so difficult. Yeah? Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. How did I do that? People are people. Nonetheless, the latter scholar masters understood them as they liked. They held fast to their own opinions and quarreled with one another in debate until they were all against the teachings of Buddha. They'd all made their own minds up to do something that was easier for them without really analyzing what Shakyamuni Buddha was saying. Praising Grandmaster Tendai, Grandmaster Chang'an had stated, quote, great discourses of commentators in India cannot compare with Tendai's doctrine, not to say opinions and comments of Chinese priest scholars. This is not excessive praise. His doctrine is incompatibly superior. Such bodhisattvas as Vasubandhu, Nagarjuna, Ashvagosha, and Saramati did not reveal it because the time was not ripe. It would have been inappropriate for them to explore that profound aspect of Shakyamuni's teachings in their day because the people just didn't have the capacity, ordinary people, laymen, people that weren't in the sphere of scholarship that these people were in, right? It would be like PhD candidates discussing their dissertations with 4-year-olds. It might be entertaining, but it wouldn't take long for the child to glaze and start playing and doing something else. They wouldn't have access mentally to the concepts being discussed. He goes on, as for the priest scholars of China before Tendai, some can be said to have been aware of the jade hidden in the lotus, but others were not. Some of those who came after Tendai surrendered to him in the end, though opposing at first, but others rejected Tendai totally. And some just took advantage of him after he died and switched their version of events to say that they were teaching what he was teaching all along and he took it from them. How many times have we seen that? It's crazy. It's like children, bullies playing in the schoolyard, yeah? An explanation about the passage in the 2nd chapter of the Lotus, which you have cited in part 5, is in order. Quote, the Buddha has eliminated all that is evil. It is merely a citation in the Lotus Sutra from other sutras preached before it. It does not belong to the Lotus doctrine. Please read the sutra carefully so that you may understand that the doctrine of mutual possession of 10 realms is clearly preached in it. I mean, Nichiren's already spent a great deal of time elucidating each chapter for each realm. We've been through this, right? For instance, we read in the 2nd chapter that the purpose of the Buddha appearing in the world was, quote, to cause all living beings to open their gates to the insight of Buddha, to instantiate through Gohonzon, through their mind's gate, the experience of Buddha. It's in the 2nd chapter. Doesn't that say that the world of Buddhahood, the realm of Buddha, exists in all the other realms? In ordinary humans? Because that's what the interlocutor here is asking. How can we possibly be imbued with this access to enlightenment? Well, that's what Shakyamuni has been teaching all along, and the Lotus Sutra is specifically about that. So how are you missing it? How are you saying no one's ever preached that before? Well, because the teachers you've been listening to have been either ignorant or keeping it from you for their own egotistic reasons. That's the answer, but let's let Nichiren talk. Interpreting this passage in the Lotus Sutra, Tendai said, 700 years ago, if the insight of the Buddha does not exist in all living beings, how can he open the gate to it? That's an interesting piece of logic, right? If no one is capable of, I don't know if you hear all those geese, it's pretty cool. So if nobody is capable of doing something, then what point is it in somebody offering or saying, go do that? It doesn't make any sense, right? You should know from this that the insight of the Buddha is inherent in the minds of all living beings. And Chang'an declared, quote, if the insight of the Buddha is non-existent in living beings, how can anyone cause them to open the gate to or be aware of it? For instance, how can a poor woman without a treasure house show off treasure? It is difficult to answer your question in parts 1 through 3 regarding Lord Shakyamuni, Buddha. This is what the Buddha warned us in the Lotus Sutra is to be most difficult of all that was preached, is being preached, and will be preached. In chapter 10, the teacher of the Dharma, the 6 difficult and 9 easier actions referred to in the following 11th chapter, Beholding the Stupa of Treasures, the treasure tower, also emphasizes this. Expounding this, Grandmaster Tendai declared, because it is diametrically opposed to what was preached earlier in the pre-Lotus Sutras, the teaching of the Lotus Sutra, both the theoretical and essential sections, is difficult to comprehend and put conviction in it, to be confident in it, because it seems so different. In truth, if you study, it isn't. It's just the logical culmination. But to those who are cursorily studying, memorizing, without really analyzing the meaning and just stuck on the words, it represents a cosmic shift of understanding. It is as difficult as facing a spear, Great Master Chang'an stated, quote, the Buddha considers the preaching of the Lotus Sutra to be the very purpose for appearing in this world. This was the goal. How can the sutra be easily understood by us ordinary men? And Grandmaster Dengyo said, quote, this Lotus Sutra is most difficult to comprehend and believe in. It is because the Buddha's true intent is revealed in it. Now, these are all statements to people of earlier epochs, right? Earlier ages. And so these statements are being made to people whose capacity is not quite up to snuff. But we don't have that problem, you and I. We have the capacity to abstract this very quickly. It's almost painfully obvious that we all have a Buddha nature. We're tripping over ourselves trying to actualize it. Regarding your question in part 7 of whether or not Tendai had a biased view, I should say that during the period spanning the time the Buddha was still alive and some 1800 years after his death, there appeared only 3 people throughout the 3 lands of India, China, and Japan who perceived the ultimate truth, that is, the Lotus Sutra. There's Shakyamuni Buddha of India, Grandmaster Tendai of China, and Grandmaster Dengyo of Japan, who are the 3 sages of Buddhism. Wow, that's a big statement right there. So understand, Nichiren isn't saying that all these other scholars couldn't perceive the profundity of the Lotus Sutra. What he is saying is that of the history of scholarship of Buddhism, only these 3 masters deeply understood, wrote commentaries about, and expounded the meat of the Lotus Sutra, while others referred to it as substance to be achieved at some time in the future. They were laying the road work while these 3 masters were visiting the architecture of Buddha-ness. Make sense? Question, what about such priest scholars of India as Nagarjuna and Vasubandhu? Again, bringing these other scholars into it, not understanding their relative place in history. Answer: these sages were also aware of the essence of the Lotus Sutra, but they did not reveal it. It wasn't the right time. People would have ran away from the complexity that their minds couldn't perceive. They still needed the preparatory teaching in order to get there. Sometimes they would touch upon the theoretical section, the first half of the Lotus Sutra, but they did not reveal the essential last half of the Lotus Sutra or their spiritual contemplation at all. Perhaps it was because the time was not ripe, although there were listeners with sufficient amount of comprehension, or perhaps both their time and listeners' capacity to understand were not ready. Among those who followed Tendai and Dengyo, there appeared many who knew the essence of the Lotus Sutra, such as the truth of 3,000 existences contained in one thought moment. This was because they could take advantage of the wisdom of the two sages. Specifically, Chia Xiang of the Sanlun school, more than 100 distant disciples of the 3 southern and 7 northern masters, Fat Sang and Cheng Quan of the Flower Garland Kigan school, Tripitaka Master Shan Chuang and Grand Master Tsuen of the Faxiang Hoso school, Tripitaka Masters Sabakara Shima and Vajrabodai, and Pukung, remember him, of the True Word Shingon school. Yeah, these people had an inkling, but they worked against it, didn't they? Tao Xuan of the Lu or Ritsu school and others were at first opposed to the two sages, but later surrendered to them completely. Finally, let us try to answer your first question in part 1 of question 18, whether the vast virtue of Lord Shakyamuni Buddha exists in our minds. How can it possibly exist in our minds? The Sutra of Infinite Meaning, which is regarded as the introductory teaching of the Lotus Sutra, explains how we attain Buddhahood. Quote, suppose there was a prince just born to a king and his queen. Growing up day by day, month by month, year by year, the new prince has reached the age of 7. Though unable to attend the affairs of state, a 7-year-old, he is respected by his father's subjects and befriended by children of great kings. Right? It's his stature, yes? He is loved by his royal parents, who find it most enjoyable to chat with him constantly. Why is this? It is because the prince is still young. My good people, he who upholds this Lotus Sutra is just like this prince. His father is the Buddha, and his mother is this sutra. Just as the prince was born to the king and his queen, the Buddha and this sutra are united in one to give birth to the Bodhisattva, the upholder of this sutra. You following this analogy? So it's really about being a good student, right? As a student of the Lotus Sutra, practice Buddhism, we are conceived, as the human mind is conceived, from enlightenment, from that which we term enlightenment, and this teaching which makes our samsaric mind aware of this perceptive experience available to us in mind, the mother. And as we grow with our learning, our self-teaching, our growing up, we can move into the role through these learnings and teachings of the mother to experience the enlightenment, the understanding, the perception of the Father, the Buddha. See the analogy? Come on, nose. Suppose, having listened to the Lotus Sutra, he reads a phrase or a verse in it, or reads it once, twice, 10, 100, 1,000, 10,000, a million zillion times. The number of grains of sand in the Ganges River, unlimited and infinite number of times. Study. Even if he had not obtained the ultimate truth by study, he would be respected by all the four groups of Buddhists, monks, nuns, laymen, and laywomen, and the 8 kinds of gods and demigods, protectors of Buddhism. Accompanied by great bodhisattvas, he would always be protected and cared for by Buddhas and completely surrounded by their benevolence. He would have the Buddha nature. It would emanate from him. It is because he is a beginner on the way to Buddhahood. And what's not specifically stated here in this quote is this: the commitment is inherent in his position. Just like we, bodhisattvas of the earth, the commitment to our enlightenment is built in. We simply need to recognize it, actualize it, which is what we do when we chant Namu. I am here and I am actualizing. What am I here and actualizing? Myoho Renge Kyo. It's built in. Nichiren continues. Then we come across the following passage in the Sutra of Meditation on Universal Sage Bodhisattva, considered to be the conclusion of the Lotus Sutra. Quote, "This Mahayana Sutra of the Lotus Flower of the Wonderful Dharma is the treasure house of all the Buddhas and the eyes of all the Buddhas in all the worlds, in the universe, past, present, and future, throughout time." It is the seed of Buddhahood giving birth to all Buddhas in the past, present, and future. You must put the Mahayana teaching into practice, lest the seed of Buddhahood be extinguished. Isn't that what I just said? Also, this Mahayana Sutra is the eyes of all the Buddhas. It is by means of this Lotus Sutra that all the Buddhas reach the stage of having 5 eyes. That's one of those expedient means stories again. But it talks about the types of vision we have, right? Vision not only with our eye consciousness, but with our mind consciousnesses, yes? The Buddha with 3 bodies, Dharma body, reward body, and accommodative body, or manifest body, was born from this sutra. In other words, the full realizing of our Buddha-ness in samsara, to have this wonderful moment, really, this short lifetime that we have, to perceive the grandeur of this entire life engine that is the universe, to understand it and flow within it. That's wonderful is too small a word, right? Comes from this sutra, from this dharma, from this teaching. This sutra is the great seal of enlightenment impressed upon the sea of nirvana, from which the Buddha with 3 pure bodies was born. In other words, this is how Shakyamuni attained enlightenment, how Siddhartha attained enlightenment. The triple-bodied Buddha, therefore, is the source of happiness for men and gods alike. For all your ideas about the forces of the universe, the wonder of birth in any sentient or insentient thing. How many videos have we watched of the germination of a flower and its blossoming? It's It's wondrous. How much more wondrous is a human being flowering and coming into its realization, its being? All of it is about the same process. Life. Now, such a way of attaining Buddhahood has not been shown anywhere except in the Lotus Sutra. Looking closely at both exoteric and esoteric, or Mahayana and Hinayana sutras preached by Shakyamuni Buddha during his lifetime, and the basic canons of various schools of Buddhism, such as the Flower Garland, the True Word, Shingon, we find that Vairochana Buddha preached the Flower Garland Sutra on the Lotus platform in the center of the universe. We also find various Buddhas gathered together from all the worlds in the universe to hear Shakyamuni Buddha preaching the Sutra of the Great Assembly. 1,000 Buddhas came to hear the preaching of the Wisdom Sutra, which expounds the teaching that both the defiled and pure are void and fused together, eliminating differences. And some 1,200 Buddhas gathered for the preaching of the Great Sun Buddha Sutra and Diamond Peak Sutra. These Buddhas, however, are those who attain Buddhahood for the first time in this life after a relatively short period of bodhisattvahood, and have been Buddhas only for a short while. They do not demonstrate the Buddha's attainment of Buddhahood in the eternal past after practicing the way of bodhisattvas for an immeasurably long period of time. Although they preach Shakyamuni's sudden attainment of Buddhahood, they have completely lost sight of the immeasurably long period of time in which he preached. In fact, Shakyamuni began to preach, planting the seed of Buddhahood in the eternal past 3,000 dust particle kalpas ago, according to the theoretical section of the Lotus Sutra, and 500 dust particle kalpas ago, according to the essential teaching section of the Lotus Sutra. Shakyamuni Buddha continued to guide his disciples until they were all sure to attain Buddhahood during the preaching of the Lotus Sutra in his present life, completing the series of his preachings which began in the eternal past. The beginning and end of his preaching, which are clearly marked in the Lotus Sutra, however, are completely ignored by other sutras, such as those just mentioned above. Thus, on the surface, such sutras as the Flower Garland, the Great Sun Buddha, appear to be distinct and perfect teachings, or to preach the way of the four vehicles, Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, Shravakas, and Pratyeka Buddhas. Thinking it over, however, we see that their teachings are still in the initial stages of Pitaka, Hinayana, and are common teachings below those of distinct and perfect teachings. They fail to preach the three causes of Buddhahood inherent in all living beings: Buddha nature, the wisdom to see it, and the right actions to develop the wisdom. This goes all the way back to the Four Noble Truths, doesn't it? How can they decide what the seed of Buddhahood is if they're stuck on these tendrils? That doesn't evaluate the tendrils. It just puts them in proper perspective. Yeah. No one that would argue that your study of chemistry or physics necessitates, or by its very nature, invalidates everything you ever learned about mathematics, algebra, trigonometry, any of that. Nobody would say that. It's a silly statement. But no one also would argue that your study of physics and advanced sciences is inferior to the stepping stones of mathematics that got you to that understanding. Right? We wouldn't even think that, right? Upon coming to China after the time of Shuang in the early Tang Dynasty, New translators of Buddhist scriptures encountered the Tendai doctrine of 3,000 existences contained in a single moment, a thought moment, and either wrote it into the sutras they had brought, they just took it, good idea, I'll put it in my bag, or claimed that they had brought the doctrine from India. This gave rise to ignorant and evil hearts. Tendai scholars were glad to find the same doctrine as their own in the newly transmitted scriptures. Oh, cool. Dumbass. Revered what had come from afar, looking down at what they themselves had, or discarded the old, preferring the new. Gosh, come on. This is all the workings of ego. These are not scholars. They're monks in perfunctory actions only. They're not really studying, are they? Nonetheless, without the seat of Buddhahood established on the basis of the 3,000 existences contained in one thought moment doctrine, both attainment of Buddhahood by all sentient beings and the worship of wooden statues and portraits are empty names without reality. Question: you've not responded to the serious question raised earlier regarding the realm of Buddhas in our minds, have you? What, are you deaf? This is a very stubborn audience, isn't it? Answer: it is said in the Sutra of Infinite Meaning, an introductory teaching to the Lotus Sutra, he's repeating himself, though unable to perform the 6 kinds of practice leading to Buddhahood, charity, observing precepts, perseverance, effort, meditation, and wisdom, upholders of this sutra will inevitably receive merits from practicing them. If you have the tenacity, in other words, to just continue to practice this, even if you just don't get it, if you don't practice the 6 kinds of things, behaviors, right? Observing precepts, perseverance, effort, meditation, and wisdom. If you uphold this sutra, if you still commit your resolve to it, you'll get there. It's inevitable. So this is where, this kind of language is where you would hear people say, just chant. It doesn't matter if you don't understand it. I've always resisted that, because to me, to not understand something fully is to not appreciate it fully. But you know what? More power to you if you can have the kind of conviction that says, I'm going to instantiate my Buddha-ness. Without understanding any of this, that conviction, and Nichiren says this over and over and over again, that conviction will get you there. Because it's an invocation. It doesn't require a huge depth of knowledge. And isn't that what Shakyamuni's point was to begin with? In fact, prior to Shakyamuni, Siddhartha was looking for a truth that was so profound and universal that it wouldn't require special knowledge, privilege, special caste in society, money, favor, politic, ego, none of that. If it was really, really a truth, then it should be available to all, no matter what. And so, in a different way of saying it, this is exactly what is being said here. You don't have to be a specially gifted person. We are in the age, the time of sentient beings, where simply anchoring our commitment to our highest potential is enough to reach it. And you could conversely say that those who are chasing after the meaning of words in order to justify what they're doing are learning and realization, hopelessly lost in the words. They're walking right by the great fountain because they're looking for clues in the dirt instead of just raising their minds and seeing the fountain. Because it's always there. Stop sifting through the dirt. Yeah? The second chapter of the Lotus Sutra states, quote, "We wish to hear the teaching equipped with the merit of Shakyamuni before and after his attaining Buddhahood." And in the Nirvana Sutra it is said, quote, "Sad is the Sadharma Pudarika Sutra, Lotus Sutra, means to be equipped with." There's yet another interpretation of the meaning of the title of the Lotus Sutra. We are equipped with. What could that possibly mean? What are we equipped with? Buddha-ness. The entire universe is equipped with Buddha-ness. But our perception, which I should clarify, is what we really mean by Buddha, the term Buddha, is our awareness in mind of this extant property, the engine of life. Bodhisattva Nagarjuna says in his Great Wisdom Discourse that Sad means 6, while the annotations on the 4 Mahayana treatises, the Chinese names, by Hui Chun of Dang China, declares that Sad should be translated as 6, which means perfection in India. The annotations on the meaning of the Lotus Sutra by Chitsang states that Sad is translated as being equipped with, while Grandmaster Tendai states in his profound meaning of the Lotus Sutra that Sad is a Sanskrit term which is translated as miao, meaning wonderful in Chinese. And you might say, well, that's quite a disparate number of meanings. And so when I say to you, the Japanese equivalent, Namu, are two distinct characters, and I say to you that Na is being completely present, and Mu is your invocation, your dedication, your commitment, your resolve to. This, in service of these translations, is what I'm saying to you is our contemporary method of respecting the wonderful and the being equipped with Myoho Renge Kyo, Pundarika Sutra, the Dharma Pundarika Sutra. These should clarify that the Lotus Sutra is the way equipped with the merit of the Buddha accumulated before and after attaining Buddhahood. I fear that I may debase these passages if I try to interpret them, but I dare to do so in order to answer your question. The gist of these passages is that Shakyamuni Buddha's merit of practicing the Bodhisattva way leading to Buddhahood, as well as that of the preaching and saving of all living beings since his attainment of Buddhahood, are altogether contained in the 5 characters of Myoho Renge Kyo, Lotus Sutra of the Wonderful Dharma. And that consistently, or consequently, when we uphold the 5 characters, the merits which he accumulated before and after his attainment of Buddhahood are naturally transferred to us. That's an unfortunate translation because it sounds like we're being given something. But we're not. We're actualizing something already inherent. And that's clear abundantly throughout the teachings. This is just one of those little slips of translation. When we invoke our Buddha-ness, we instantiate it. You can look at that as a reaching out to or a being given from, but it's internal. It's in one's own mind. It doesn't come from anywhere else. It's already in every molecule, particle, fluid. It's in your energy. Thus it is stated in chapter 4 of the Lotus Sutra, understanding by conviction, that 4 great Shravaka, such as Kashyapa, rejoiced in their understanding of the teaching of the Lotus Sutra, enabling Shaka to attain Buddhahood, and reported to the Buddha that they had been given invaluable jewels without asking for them. This represents the attainment of Buddhahood by the Shravaka realm contained in our mind, our student realm. When we let go of the particular words and imbue our practice method with conviction, simply to instantiate our Buddha-ness, we invoke it. It's already there, awaiting our recognition of it. We experience it. And that experience doesn't have words. It's simply an experience, a perceptive reality. Yeah? Describing it always will fall short. All words can do is point. They can't be the thing that they're pointing to. Not only the Shravaka, but also Shakyamuni Buddha is within us. For we encounter such a statement as this in the 2nd chapter of the Lotus Sutra. Quote, "It was my Shakyamuni's original vow to let all beings become like myself, enlightened. My vow has now been fulfilled. I have helped them all enter the way of the Buddha." Does this not mean that Shakyamuni Buddha, who has attained perfect enlightenment, is our flesh and blood, and all the merits he had accumulated before and after attaining Buddhahood are our bones? He's really trying to get these people who are questioning him to understand the words they are reading aren't about the words. They're about an experience that's in everything. That all we need do is use a simple method with conviction, to instantiate this Buddha-ness, this realm of realms. Moreover, the 11th chapter of the Lotus Sutra, beholding the stupa of treasures, beholding our own treasure tower, those who uphold the teaching of this sutra are deemed to serve me, Shakyamuni, and the Buddha of many treasures. Uphold. What does uphold mean? Those who uphold this sutra, right? Those who actualize this sutra, those who see this sutra as the truth and use its method to invoke the truth in themselves. That is upholding, yeah? They also serve Buddhas in manifestations here who adorn and glorify their respective worlds. Because all of the fanciful stories about enlightenment in all the expedient means in the Lotus Sutra come together to show you that these are all manifestations of potentials of the mind. And your mind is no different than any other. This means that Shakyamuni Buddha, the Buddha of many treasures, and all the Buddhas in manifestation are in our minds. Isn't that what I just said? And that we, upholders of the Lotus Sutra, will follow their steps and inherit all the merits of those Buddhas. There's no difference. This is the meaning of the passage in the 10th chapter of the Lotus Sutra, the teacher of the Dharma, which reads, quote, "Those who hear of this Lotus Sutra even for a moment, will instantly attain perfect enlightenment. End quote. A passage in the 16th chapter of the Lotus Sutra, the duration of the life of the Tathagata, contends, quote, "It has been many hundreds of thousands of billions of Nayuta of Kalpa, an incalculably long period of time, since I have attained Buddhahood." Is that Shakyamuni? Or is that a statement about Buddhahood? It means that Shakyamuni Buddha within our minds is an ancient Buddha without beginning, manifesting himself in three bodies and attained Buddhahood in the eternal past, described as 500 dust particle kalpas ago. So what is the eternal past? The beginning of time. Time begins with the process that leads to the Big Bang, doesn't it? The formation achieves form. That first formation, that first successful manifestation of form from energies, right? Karma, form, time, space. From that moment on, moment to moment to moment to moment to moment, boom, 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 boom. Just manifestations on top of manifestations and ad nauseum until we get to this apparatus that emerges a mind. It's an immense thought. So don't panic if it seems too gargantuan, but you will become accustomed to it because you're living it right now. Now, I'm going a little long, but we're almost done with this. So I want to complete this thought, okay? In the same chapter, another passage reads, quote, "My lifespan, which I obtained through the practice of the way of bodhisattvas, has not yet been expired." His enlightenment. "It is twice as long as the length of the time stated above, the 500 dust particle kalpas. This reveals the bodhisattva realm within our minds, from beginningless time to endless time, not eternal, only eternal in relation to the life of the universe, which we know had a beginning and we know will have an end. It may be a cosmic, cyclical, conformal re-instantiation of the energies. However it ends, what we're talking about beginning and ending isn't the universe, it's time, space itself, of which we all are fundamentally. So if you were wanting to say to me, Sifu, are you saying that the Buddha mind is simply time, space itself, with all of its potential manifestations within the time space? I would say, sure. But Buddha, what we call Buddha or Buddha-ness or Buddhahood, is specifically your experience of that. Because as you experience the truth that everything is of the same energy, of the same momentum, going through manifestation after manifestation, that certain manifestations beget other manifestations, that causal relationships, of course, exist, that one thing begets another, without being emotionally attached to thingifying, holding still, keeping static, that once you excite your mind with the vision the perception that nothing is static, that we are simply swimming with this whole incredible life experience, thing, process, I prefer, then all of your qualms and your nervousness and your fear and your hanging on to, all of those things that create so much heaviness in our lives, well, they're unnecessary. In fact, they comically they're not even there. Those are manufactured. Those are samsaric manufacturings left over from the desire to be. And we go ahead and be, but without the stress of losing or gaining anything, because everything's here, constantly, beginning to end. It's all the same stuff. The Bodhisattvas described in the 15th chapter, the appearance of the Bodhisattvas from underground, who have sprung out of the great earth, as numerous as the number of dust particles of 1,000 worlds, are followers of the original Buddha Shakyamuni, who resides within our minds. That's all of humanity, my friends. This is why I say, yes, we have a Sangha here on this channel. You and I are part of a group of like-minded individuals practicing, studying, dedicated to our Lotus Sutra practice. But also understand that our Sangha lives within the Sangha, which is all of humanity. And in all of that humanity, there's a lot of ignorance. There are people not practicing correctly. There are people practicing all sorts of weirdness. They're just ignorant. They don't understand. They haven't encountered yet the perfect teaching, the self-actualizing Buddha. And they're all desperately seeking answers from somewhere else, when all along they carry in their three bodies enlightenment, unaware. That is where we raise our compassion. That is where I say we need to look at everyone else in our environs as Buddhas who are unaware of their own Buddhahood. How can we influence them so that they can make their own decision to attain Buddhahood? Because you can't force Buddhahood on someone. Only the mind itself can choose, can decide to awaken. All we can do is influence them. Yeah? They are like Tai Gung Kung Wang, and the Duke of Chao, retainers of King Wu of the Chao dynasty in ancient China, who at the same time served the king's young son, King Cheng, or like, I don't know that story, or like Taikuichi no Sukune of ancient Japan, a leading minister to Empress Jingu, who concurrently served her son, Prince Nintoku. Just like them, Bodhisattva superior practices, Jogyo, which Nichiren himself identifies with, limitless practice, Muhengyo, pure practice, Jogyo, and steadily established practice, Anryugyo, the four leaders of these bodhisattvas, sprung from the earth, are simultaneously followers of the original Buddha and bodhisattvas who reside in the minds of us, ordinary beings, all of humanity. Therefore, Grandmaster Miao Lao has declared in his annotations on the Great Concentration and Insight, Mohochi-kwan, you should know that both our bodies and the land on which we live are part of a 3,000 modes of existence which exists in our minds. Consequently, upon our attainment of Buddhahood, we are in complete agreement with the truth of the 3,000 existences contained in one thought moment. And our single body and single thought permeate through all the worlds in the universe. The entirety of the universe is in our minds. I don't mean it doesn't exist. I mean that the perception, all modes of perception, all modes of manifestation of potential are no different from the processes that result in our consciousness, our perception of the great drama of life, the engine of life, this universe. It may look like there are myriad, uncountable differences in everything in the universe, and yet, fundamentally and day by day, our scientific research and our greatest minds on the planet are discovering more and more that everything we experience in the universe, including my coffee, my fingers, you, all made of energy. Fields of energy. Fields of formation, of possibility. And all of this manifestation, it isn't manifestation of different things. It's manifestation of different forms of the same thing. So, if you understand that everything is the same thing, then the idea of grasping onto one thing over another thing is ridiculous. Because they're all the same thing. Stop worrying about it. That's very much mind-blowing. Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. Hang on to your experience, not your stuff. Wow. Oh, brilliant. Thank you for letting me finish that. I know this one went a little long. Thank you for listening. If you liked anything you heard here, please subscribe, download the audio podcast, divvy this up. Some of you can't watch all of this in one sitting. I get it. Hopefully I made this informative enough. If I've left like some big gaping hole, or if I've said something, what the hell do you mean there, Sifu? Let me know. Let me address it. Let me clarify. I'm not a perfect being. Samsarically, anyway. I'll let you figure that one out. All right. Take care of yourself. Be kind. There's enough confusion and craziness in the world. We don't need to add to it, right? Chant Namo Myoho Renge Kyo, and I will see you in the next one, I promise. Until then, bye for now.